Hello and welcome to Between Two Pillows. This is a new segment exclusively for my YouTube channel, where I discuss whatever sort of fun ideas that pop up in between two podcasts. I encourage you guys to comment and ask questions and what you want me to talk about, and then I'll try to respond to them in video form or in the podcast as well. So those of you who just are happening across my page so far, and you haven't had a chance to look at your first video of me watching, and you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Jolie. I'm an artist. That's one of my pieces behind me. And on the side, my life's work has been sort of dominated by the idea that we're living in a simulation and that we're in a multiverse, but the way I view a multiverse is that other parallel universes are in fact just servers of the simulation. Same thing with other dimensions. They're just servers of the simulation. Now, ultimately, who created the simulation, what its purpose is, has yet to be determined, and nobody can conclusively say without a shadow of a doubt unless they are conscious once they're outside of their avatars. But I am certainly not one to shy away from theorizing, and so that is often what is discussed on the podcast. It's theories on the nature of reality, taken in whatever sources we can come across to sort of dissect what this realm, dimension, world, server is. Occasionally, we will also be talking about sort of day-to-day things, average, self-help kind of stuff. I have been specifically requested that I do that. As I said, I encourage you guys to comment and ask questions, and we will discuss it going forward. So on this episode, I wanted to start with a quote. There's a quote by Steve Jobs, and it's something to the effect of, everything that is ever made was made by people no smarter than yourself. It was one of those quotes I came across when just randomly scrolling through, I think, Instagram, like over a decade ago. It's one of those things where, I'm sure this probably happens to you, where you see a line or you see something just brief that completely shifts your entire perspective. And seeing that was an eye-opening experience for me. It was a aha moment, like, oh shit, that's true. I didn't use it to feed my ego. If anything, it helped me to better challenge my ego. I think a lot of people have this misconception that having an ego means that you're like essentially arrogant and you're full of yourself or you're narcissistic. That's not what it is. The ego is nothing more than the pre-programmed personality of your avatar. So 9 times out of 10, a lot of the battle that you sort of engage in isn't going to be with other people. A lot of the things that restrict you is your ego. The ego essentially is a program that keeps you set on a particular path. And so a lot of our challenges come with wanting to do something, wanting to take yourself off a particular reality experience. When you're trying to change things about your life, it is not other people, but it's actually the ego that stands in the way. So I don't look at an ego as something that substantiates you. 9 times out of 10, a lot of the times, people are actually doing battle and trying to exert their will over their ego, whether they're conscious of it or not. So that quote was not something that boosted my ego. It was something that helped me strengthen my will. There was a time when I had a lot of reverence for people who were credentialed, right? Like, so you have a scientist, for example, who comes out and he makes a claim. Now, the claim is a theory. It's based on his observation and information that he's been exposed to, but he presents or she presents their theory as if it's fact. And then they have their theory substantiated by the masses who also trust their authority. And as a result, we end up taking in things without question that may not necessarily be true, and forgetting the fact that at the end of the day, it is just a theory, which is an educated guess, right? And if you have a mind and you can expose yourself to the same type of information that those scientists, those credentialed scientists with degrees, nothing wrong with degrees, nothing wrong with letters behind your name. I'm just saying that sometimes you could talk to an expert on one thing, and get one opinion. But people forget that on the opposite end, there are experts with the same level of training, with the same background, with the same, education, who have the complete and diametrically opposed theory, right? But because this person maybe doesn't have as much power, or isn't as politically correct, or I don't know, just not involved in the establishment, their theories gets discounted. So a lot of the things that we have been taught to believe, even at university, even in books, right? Just if you do your own reading, or if you're, institutionally trained, these are what the prevailing or what the commonly accepted theories are. But that does not mean that they are always the most accurate or the most correct. So when I heard that quote, it basically shook me from the reverence that I've had for experts, and gave me the understanding that, one, no matter what the topic, right, I have I have a brain. I have the same brain that if I exposed myself to the same level of information that these individuals, these credential individuals also expose their minds to, or have exposed their minds to, I can formulate my own theory as well. And what that did was it removed the intimidating factors behind wanting to study a subject like quantum physics, wanting to study, quantum mechanics or neuroscience or psychology, or even the occult. Because at the end of the day, if a person is presenting their idea, I'm grateful. But I want to know what I think about something if I were exposed to that same information as well. And so that is something that I continuously encourage my viewers and listeners to do, is operate with the understanding that any author is essentially acting as an authority figure over a particular subject. And if it is an authority figure, you are still within your rights as an individual to question said authority figure, right? Or take what they have to say with a grain of salt, right? Because just because somebody's an authority in a particular subject doesn't mean that they're always right, right? So we've learned historically there were things that were within the law, right? That if you broke the law, the most moral thing to do would have been to break the law or to question or challenge authority on a particular subject like slavery, right? Or even sort of dogmatic ideas that were like enforced on people with religion. There was the law, but the most courageous and wisest thing that you could do was challenge the law on something. And that was how that is always how society changes. A small group of people go against what is considered the status quo and bring about big changes for the next generation. But it's always a birthing pain, right? Because the masses want to just accept what is status quo, right? So that quote has been with me for a very long time, and it has encouraged me to, while seeking out information, keep an open mind, not just accept an author's conclusion simply because they have letters behind their name. And also to seek out data, information, read books from people who may not have letters behind their names, but they have been exposed to, certain level of information over and over and over again. So I want to seek out what they have to say. That helps broaden my horizon, helps open my mind, and it helps me respect people's experiences, not just a letter behind their name or letters behind their name or a piece of paper from an institution. Please understand that the respect that we give to people, who have been educated formally in an institution, while warranted, wasn't always the case, right? So there were ways in the past that a person could learn. You could, of course, go to a university and learn to get a piece of paper, but there was also apprenticeship where you basically learn on the job, right? And so because the institution of higher learning has become a business, and because businesses essentially control how individuals in this society, for the most part, think, people forget that there's other ways to learn and be learned and present knowledge and show that you know what you're talking about without having a piece of paper from an institution. And so you have to consider all sources. Obviously, check it, right? Don't just have a mind so open that, your brain falls out. There's a favorite quote that I've heard. But if a person has shown proof and they're saying, listen, this is my background, right? Anthony Peake, for example, he's a doctor, but he's a medical doctor. However, and he went to school for business. However, he has extensively studied. I mention his books all the time. He has extensively, it's become his life obsession. He has extensively studied the question about what happens after we die. He talks about astrophysics. He talks about quantum physics. He talks about the paranormal. He talks about the occult. Whether or not he has a degree where he can say, well, listen, trust me because I've got a piece of paper from X, Y, and Z. I discount all that. I don't need the piece of paper. I could tell by listening to what he's saying or reading what he's saying because he's citing his sources. He really knows his stuff, right? So having an open mind and considering all the source with the understanding that your brain is just as good as a person with a letter or 3 letters or whatever behind their name. Okay, so I wanted to really, that was in my heart to kind of share this information with you, because ultimately what's most important is that we all learn together, forming a community of people who are on the same wavelength. They're all trying to understand the nature of our reality, but people who are open-minded, right? Because there are a lot of really intelligent people out there who have been programmed with the idea that in order for you to be intelligent, you also have to be blindly skeptical, right? Just anything that doesn't fit into a particular worldview, completely discard it. And at the end of the day, that's not how you learn. That's not how you grow. That's how you keep your mind closed. And it's people who are constantly pushing against the borders of what is considered normative, those are the ones who end up changing society. So I want to be part of a community of individuals like yourself who are exploring sort of interesting ideas, as opposed to, like, my biggest pet peeve is, like, I don't want to talk about the weather. Don't hit me with that small talk. I don't have time for it. Like, there's so much going on in this world. Let's talk about that. So let's talk about this. I was having a conversation with my cousin this morning. He was telling me how, like, we were on the phone and all of a sudden he kind of like started freaking out and said, "What?" He was like, "I'm looking out my window and I saw a lady with a yellow jacket. I know what I saw," right? So I have a mental picture. I saw a lady with a yellow jacket. I look away, look back, and it's now a man. What just happened? Like, am I tripping? And my response was like, no, actually, he was like, "I know I'm not tripping because I know what I saw. I know what I saw. I know what I saw." And when people come at me with that level of like certainty of their experience, I absolutely do not challenge them, because they said they know what they saw. I am not them. I can't tell them what they saw, right? Whether or not I want to accept it, whether or not it conflicts with what I think is possible, doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, they said that they saw something. I've always believed that, everybody's reality experiences differs, right? So like, just like there's no way to know if the way I see the color pink is the way you see the color pink. There's no way we can confirm that. Like, this painting could look completely different to you. Even the face could look completely different to you than it does to me, because at the end of the day, I truly believe that reality experiences are subjective. It differs from person to person. So when a person comes at me with that level of, no, I know what I saw, I take a step back and then I consider it and I take it in, right? As like, okay, that's a possibility. Now, what do you think that is? Now, I know you guys have absolutely had the same experience where you saw something and then you looked again and it was something completely different. Now, the conventional explanation of that is that it didn't really happen, or your mind's playing tricks on you. And that's fine. That's one explanation, right? And that's what most people would expect you to believe, right? But that's one explanation. It is an explanation for a phenomenon that consistently happens, is not the answer. It's just one explanation, right? Like, if I walked into the kitchen and everything was like perfectly cleaned up, right? And I asked myself, who did this? Well, one explanation is that, okay, my husband did it. Another explanation is my daughter did it, right? If I just pick one explanation and run with it, that doesn't make it true. It just means that that's the explanation that I've chosen to explain a situation. So when you have an experience like that, society tells you to like just disregard it. Your mind must have made a mistake. Yeah, maybe that is certainly one explanation, but it's not the only explanation. And so what I want to discuss is, could there be other explanations? And of course, being me, what I said to my cousin was that I genuinely believe, because these sort of things happen to me, the difference is I don't dismiss them. I make a mental note and I trust my observations. I don't try to sort of ask other people, do you see this? I mean, if it's something like where we're simultaneously experiencing something and then they take like an opposing view, I just go ahead and trust what I saw. I might ask them, wait, did you see that? And if they're like, no, I just put my foot down and say, well, I know what I saw, and I table it and I put it in like, just, okay. Don't know what that was, but that was something that like was a glitch, and I'm gonna pay attention to that. The minds of, for example, a schizophrenic is capable of seeing things, perceiving things. They're not bound to the five senses for whatever reason. They're not bound to a particular perception of reality the way the rest of us are, right? And so a lot of the things that they can perceive is as a result of their brains being damaged in some way. Society would call it damaged in some way. It could, be a change, perhaps. A follower of the podcast who works in therapy as a therapist had told me that in other cultures, particularly in older cultures, a person who would have been in our time diagnosed with and discarded as a person with schizophrenia was actually elevated by members of their society, because they were capable of being able to, quote, see beyond the veil. I'm paraphrasing. But that's something to be mindful of. That are there substances, think Mario, that you can take that can warp your brain or hack your brain in a way to allow you to perceive things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to perceive, right? Now, if that occurs naturally, right? So they do say that your brain produces its own DMT. So if that occurs naturally, you see something out of the corner of your eye, you sense something, you feel something, you feel like you're being scared, or I'm sorry, you're being watched. Do you discount that? It's so dismissive to discount even your own experiences, simply because it doesn't align with what the society at large expects, right? So I just think it's something that I keep wanting to reinforce, that we need to be mindful of not dismissing other people's experiences, especially if their energy in which they talk about is strong, but also not dismissing our own experiences as well. So that's important to me. Final thing, I do want to end with this. This is something that's going to be recurring because I know a lot of people get bogged down when they have a desire, right? Whether or not that desire has been downloaded to them and has not originated with them. And I use terminology of download. Please listen to the podcast to understand why I say that. But it does lean heavy into the simulation hypothesis. If we have to embrace the fact that we are in a simulation and then go from there, right? So what do I always say? People go, oh, we're in a simulation, but they don't explore what that means beyond that. So what I'm trying to do here is explore what that means using the understanding of technology as we know it. Sam Harris, in his book Free Will, basically talks about how thoughts just happen. You cannot control your thoughts. I'm taking that a step further and saying desires just happen. You cannot control your desire. Why do I have the desire for something and you don't? Right? Well, and where did that desire come from? And why do I have that desire today and I didn't yesterday? Right? Well, it's all part of a pre-programmed, all of time is happening right now. The flow of time is an illusion. It's part of a pre-programmed, predetermined, most probable, remember I used the hand analogy, most probable reality that you found yourself in right now. So any sort of download, any sort of prompt that you get as a desire, check it, because if you're trying to shift to another server or another, a parallel universe, if you're trying to consciously shift, then you're going to have to consciously examine those prompts, because those prompts are what keep you on a highly probable timeline. Okay, so once again, I will leave you guys with this idea. Due to the nature of our reality, sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, when you have an expressed desire, right, there will always be I want to reinforce this idea. The line from point A, which is a desire to do something, and point B, which is the actualization of what you want, is never going to be a straight line. If it is, I should say that there's a higher probability of it not being a straight line. Are there situations or circumstances where you have an expressed desire for something and then, in enough time you're met with no obstacles, it's just easy sailing, right? Absolutely, sure. The statistical flukes do happen. We're dealing with probability here, right? This is a mathematical universe, so we are dealing with probability. But 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, if you have a desire, first check it against your will. Is this a desire that you actually want, or is this something that's part of like your overall sort of narrative for your avatar? When you have a desire for something, it's never a straight line. There's always going to be obstacles. You have to adapt and not be sort of emotionally reactive so point A, point B, imagine like a wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, right? So you're trying to navigate to this reality experience, right? Okay, so you're trying to actualize this reality experience. It's not an instantaneous actualization of reality. Like the dimensions that you visit when you sleep, when you dream, those are instantaneous. You think about something, whether or not you're conscious or not, but weird things happen, and it usually in an instant, right? But in this world that is the constant, it is not that. So always, always, always expect that there will be obstacles. The key here is, though, if you can trust that you'll always get to this, reality experience that is already existing right now as a probability, if you can just trust that and not emotionally engaged, you can sort of rise above the fray, and the simulation itself sort of loses a hold on you and on your psyche. And that's how you sort of mitigate suffering. So it's actually kind of a direct challenge to say the Buddhist tenet, which is that desire is the root cause of suffering. Yes, it is, right? Because at the point when you have a desire for something and then you're trying to get to the actualization of it, this is the root, right? Suffering is here, actualization is over here. So desire, yes, absolutely, is the root. But his response to that, the Buddha's response to that was, if you remove suffering and you just kind of go with the flow, then you don't really have to deal with this, which is also true. But if you are trying to actively engage in gameplay, or if you want to play the game, you can either go with the flow. That's one option, and that's what he did. He just sat under a tree and let people come to him. But if you want to play a different game, if you want to play a more active game, then desire doesn't have to be the root cause of suffering, right? Because if you understand there's all this bullshit in the middle and it's a road to a point in space-time that you're trying to go to an actualized realization, if you just take that for granted, then the suffering goes away. The suffering is not, the suffering itself is optional, right? You can recognize it for what it is, right? If you're going, okay, I'm going to go to the grocery store, and you hit 10 stop signs from you to the grocery store, unless you give yourself a weird like time limit, which we kind of do to ourselves, which you're just adding struggle to the situation or suffering to the situation that you don't necessarily have to. Unless you give yourself some time limit, you're not worried that the grocery store is going to cease to exist if you don't get there in time. It's there, right? So it's that experience, right? But when you get through, then you go, okay, this is a stop sign, you stop. Okay, then you might see a roadblock. You just go around the roadblock, right? The anxiety, that's all unnecessary. You typically just sit in the car and you just drive through it and, you know, enjoy the scenery with the understanding that you will eventually get to where you're going. And I really, really, really wanted to reinforce that concept because it's very important, and it's how, in my opinion, you mitigate suffering within simulation. I'll leave it at this. I had a couple people reach out to me because I had put out the video saying that I'm taking a step away from TikTok and exploring other options while my account is shadow banned. And I appreciate the concern. I really do. I'm so grateful for that. My response is that it was an obstacle that I have expected, right? Because at the end of the day, my stated goal was to reach as many people as possible. If I'm not able to reach people, then I have to let that go because it's in conflict of my stated goal. I have not deleted the account. It's going to be there. But a lot of Black creators have been saying that they're having similar issues. So I'm not taking it personally. In fact, I'm happy to be able to take a step back because I don't want to contribute to something that is continuously sort of inhibitive to people of color and restrictive to creators in general. I don't want to be an active participator in that. But at the end of the day, my ideas are out there for whomever the algorithm will send their way. And I've put out, ways in which they can find more stuff and more information. But I have sort of achieved my goal there, which was to get ideas out there. So it's not a failure. It's more of a sidestep. This is an obstacle. I didn't set out to be like huge on TikTok. I set out to reach as many people as possible. So that was just an obstacle that I expected from point A to point B, right? Reach as many people as possible. That's an obstacle. I'm just sidestepping it. And the reason why I'm saying this in this video is because I want you guys to have that same energy, because you every day you're going to wake up with a desire to do something. And you're going to face obstacles, right? It's just like, I don't even want to call them obstacles. I would just say call them road closures or something like that, right? Or it's a stoplight. So you just have to turn right or just get out of the way, or it's a roadblock, whatever, but you're still going to get to where you're going, right? So long as you just know, okay, I'm trying to get there, and just keep your mind sort of focused on that. So one of my favorite things from the last couple of episodes I've been talking about is the understanding and the acceptance that this is not an instant actualization reality. Right? It's not like it's a dream, right? A lot of people who have psychedelic experiences think they keep repeating the same thing. Life is a dream. Life is a dream. Life is a game, right? Leela, Maya, all the world's a stage. Repeating the same sort of ideas. However, you can actualize what you desire, right? Because if you look around and you see other people sort of having that same experience, and clearly it's something that is available for you as well. It's just not going to be something that you will be able to attain in an instant. And so you just have to adjust accordingly. That's it. So I hope that was motivational. And I do appreciate you checking the first episode of Between Two Pillows exclusively for now on YouTube, just going with the flow. But overall, always appreciate you guys listening, and comment if you have any questions that you want me to discuss for the next episode of Between Two Pillows, Between Two Podcasts. All right, thanks for watching.